In today's midweek message, we're going to be taking a look at John chapter 1, verses 17 to 18. And that says, "For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known." So John is telling us a few different things here. One, he tells us that God gave us the law through Moses, but then grace and truth comes through Jesus Christ. We have a progression going here. We also learn from John that Jesus is indeed God, and that's not the only place we see it, but this is another place to look where John proclaims this fact. But then John also says this curious thing here. He says, no one has ever seen God. And here when he says that, he's talking about God the Father. And on the surface, that seems pretty easy to understand, but we always like to say we should interpret Scripture with Scripture. And when we start to triangulate this passage with some other passages in the Old Testament, we run into a little bit of a problem. Exodus chapter 24, verses 9 to 11 says, "Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel went up and saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was something like a pavement made of lapis lazuli, as bright as the sky. But God did not raise up his hand against these leaders of the Israelites. They saw God, and they ate and drank." So here we look at these things and it can be a little bit confusing because on one hand we have John saying no one has ever seen God, but on the other hand we have Moses saying that he and 73 others did indeed see him. So do we have a conflict here? Well, let's take a look, and I think once we dive into this a little bit, we're going to find some very satisfying explanations here, and we'll see there's not a problem, as always, when we look at potential conflicts within the Bible. We're going to look at this from a couple of different angles. We're going to look at this from the angle of logistics and also from an angle that involves some kind of figurative language. We'll start here with the logistics. What we have here, when we have John saying first no one has seen God and Moses saying he actually has seen him, this may be something we can chalk up to just a matter of precision within the language being used. Back in another portion of the Old Testament, Exodus chapter 33, we see another encounter between Moses and God. And in that chapter, Moses asks God to if he can see his glory. He tells God, I want to see your glory. And God tells him this in verses 19 to 20. "I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But," he said, "you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live." After that, God places Moses on a rock. God walks by him, and once he passes, Moses is allowed to look at God's back. And in the Hebrew here, when it says back, that could mean literally like the backside of, or it could also mean afterglow. So it's kind of hard to tell from the original Hebrew translation, but Moses may have indeed literally seen the back of God, or he may have just seen the afterglow of God passing by. So this happens. And then Moses goes down the mountain with the tablets, and the Bible said that his face glowed with a radiance, and it glowed with a radiance so much that it scared everybody. And from that point on, he took to wearing a veil. And so when he would go and talk to God, he'd remove the veil, talk to God, come back and tell the people what he heard. His face would be glowing, and then he'd cover his face back up again until he went to go speak to God another time. So logistically, we may actually have a good answer here. Exodus chapter 33 may have just clarified the issue that no one can see God's face. So back in Exodus 24, where we have Moses and the 73 others who saw God, that passage that we started with that may be the conflict with John, we said, we have in there somewhat of a first-hand account of what they saw. It's recorded. It says they saw God, and then it gives a description. But rather than giving us a detailed description of God himself, Moses gives us a vivid description of the ground that's under God's feet. Now, we don't know for sure, but it's probably reasonable to assume that when these men found themselves in the presence of God, they probably fell down prostrate in front of him. They would have been aware of his being, but they only saw his feet, and they vividly remembered the ground that was underneath his feet. But it's likely that they never looked up and saw his face. And that works That educated guess works within the context of Moses' firsthand account. It also works along with Exodus chapter 33. They saw a part of God, or they saw one aspect of God, but they didn't look into his eyes. And we see a similar thing take place when other people in the Old Testament meet God. Isaiah chapter 6 verses 1 through 3 says, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord, high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory." So again, similar to what we saw in Exodus 24, we have Isaiah coming into the presence of the Father, and he says that he saw him, and then he relates the details, but when he describes the things that he saw, he's describing the things that were all around God. He wasn't describing God himself. He talked about the train of God's robe. He talked about the angels that were above him. And while Isaiah doesn't come out and say it, I would have to think that if he really saw God, if Isaiah really stared and got a good look at the face of God the Father, wouldn't you think that that would be the thing he would feel led to describe here? That's what we would all want to know. But Isaiah doesn't describe that because I don't think he ever saw the face of God. It's the same thing with Ezekiel. Ezekiel chapter 1, he says he sees this vision of God and he gives us this graphic description of what he saw, but he doesn't include any of God's features. He talks about having seen a figure. He talks about seeing a lot of light. He talks about seeing a lot of fire. So logistically speaking, I don't think we have a conflict here. Yes, John says nobody has seen God, and yes, there's Old Testament accounts of people who said they saw God, but nobody seems to have seen his face. No one has come solidly face to face with God the Father like any normal man would when he meets with another man. So all of this really holds together, I think. It all fits together very well. We don't really have a problem here. But if we go back to the passage in John where we started all of this, I think if we really look at what John's saying here, I think we'll see that he's talking about more than just logistics. Let's read the passage again. "For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known." Here, in addition to the logistics, we actually have John showing us a contrast between Moses and Jesus. Moses brought us the law, and so through him we were able to see one aspect of God. But through Jesus, John shows us we were able to see so much more. He, Jesus, is of course fully God, and at the time of his earthly ministry, he was fully man at the very same time. And so with him walking the earth and ministering directly to people, for the very first time, people were able to see more than just God's essence. For the first time, people were able to look on more than just God's back, or they were able to see more than just his feet. They were able to see all of him. They were able to gaze directly at his face. They could see his character. They could see him pour out love to others. They could actually watch him heal the sick. And so through actually seeing Jesus and the subsequent recording of those events in the Bible, all of us are able to see God the Father for who he is exactly. And that's why in John 14:9, Jesus told Philip, "Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father." Well, I hope this has been helpful. I hope it's been interesting. And until next time, Lord willing, there is a next time. May God bless you and your family.